I want to tell you about the most expensive conversation a man ever had with himself. Not with me. He barely talked to me at the end. He had already decided what kind of story this was going to be, and in his version of it, I was a minor character. The help, the transitional figure, the placeholder until the real person arrived. He did not understand, until it was much too late, that I had been running his entire operation for 5.5 years. That the accounts, the processes, the client relationships, the digital presence, the institutional knowledge that made everything function, all of it lived in me. And a very significant portion of it lived in one small, humble, easily overlooked notepad document sitting on the desktop of a company computer. A computer he told me to wipe. So I did. But let me start at the beginning, because the beginning matters. The beginning is the part that explains why I genuinely tried to warn him before it happened. And why, when he talked over me and told me to just get on with it, I shrugged and did exactly what I was told. My name is Samantha. I am 34 years old, I live in the UK, and I have been an accountant for 10 years. Not a glamorous profession, I know. Nobody writes movies about accountants. Nobody makes television dramas about the thrill of a reconciled balance sheet. But it is work I am genuinely good at, and it is work that matters enormously to the businesses that depend on it, even when, especially when, those businesses take the person doing it entirely for granted. This is a story about what happens when a man decides that loyalty is a one-way street, and what happens when the street ends. I joined the firm when I was 28. It was a small accounting branch, part of a regional network, but in practice, each branch ran largely independently. This one had a modest client list, a handful of staff, and a director who had been there since the branch opened and who treated it, for all practical purposes, as his personal enterprise. His name was Mr. Holt. He was in his mid-50s when I joined, the kind of man who has occupied a position of authority long enough that he has stopped distinguishing between what the position requires and what he personally prefers. He had opinions about everything: the layout of the office, the formatting of client reports, the acceptable hour at which to make a cup of tea. He had a particular way of delivering these opinions that was not quite aggressive and not quite reasonable, and existed in the uncomfortable space between both. But he was, in those early years, a manageable presence. And the work itself was good. I settled in quickly. Within the first year, I had taken on a client load larger than my job description specified, because the person who had held the role before me had left somewhat abruptly, and the transition had not been clean. Files were incomplete. Processes were undocumented. Client relationships were fraying because nobody had been maintaining them with any consistency. I fixed it, methodically and professionally. I am a problem solver by nature. When I see a gap, I fill it. When I see something that is not working, I find out why and make it work. It is not a complicated philosophy. It is just how I am built. By the end of my second year, I was, in all practical terms, running the day-to-day operations of that branch: the client accounts, the compliance filings, the internal reporting, the vendor relationships, the staff scheduling, and, from year 3 onward, the social media presence that Holt had decided the firm needed because a competitor had started posting on LinkedIn and he did not like the idea of being behind. I will come back to the social media situation in detail. It is the hinge on which this entire story turns. But first, I need to tell you about the 5 years between when I arrived and when it all came apart, because those years are the context, and without context, the ending is just an anecdote. With context, it is something else entirely. It is the only logical conclusion of everything that came before it. 5 years in a small firm is different from 5 years in a large organization. In a large organization, 5 years is a reasonable tenure. You know your function, your team, your systems. You are one competent person among many. In a small firm, 5 years means you are woven into the fabric of the thing. You know where everybody is buried, figuratively speaking. You know which clients need to be handled with particular care and which can be managed through routine processes. You know that. Holt always calls a specific client himself before tax season because they went to school together, and he considers it a personal relationship, and you know to schedule around that call rather than sending the automated reminder that would come across as impersonal. You know which accounts require quarterly check-ins because the client's business structure is complex. You know that the filing software crashes if you run payroll and compliance exports simultaneously. And you know the workaround, and you are the only one who knows the workaround. And you have been meaning to document it for 2 years, but there is always something more urgent. That is what 5 years in a small firm looks like. It is not a job, it is a web. And you are not just working within it, you are holding a significant portion of it together. Mr. Holt knew this. He did not acknowledge it the way he should have. Compensation had not kept pace with responsibility. And the conversations about that tended to go in circles, ending with some version of, we'll revisit this when the business is in a better position. But he knew it in the practical sense. He trusted my work. He sent clients to me. He left me alone to manage things, which was, I had come to understand, the highest expression of confidence he was capable of offering. That trust was real. And what makes what happened next so clarifying is that he threw it away for a reason that had absolutely nothing to do with me. He threw it away for his daughter. Her name was Jade. She was 22 years old. She was Mr. Holt's only child and, by his account, the most remarkable human being who had ever considered entering the accounting profession. I want to be fair about Jade here. She was not malicious. She was not scheming or undermining me from behind the scenes. She was a young woman whose father had decided she should have a job at his firm, and she was navigating that situation with the kind of vague, cheerful discomfort of someone who has been placed in a position they did not entirely choose and is not entirely sure they want. She had no accounting qualifications. She had not, as far as I could determine, held any job at all, not retail, not food service, not any of the entry-level roles that most people have worked by 22. She had gone from school to a period of traveling, and then returned home, and Mr. Holt had decided that the time had come for her to begin her career. At his firm, in my role, this was not communicated to me directly, at first. It was communicated the way things are communicated, when the person doing the communicating knows it will not be well received. Obliquely, gradually, in small installments designed to make the full picture visible only once it is too late to object to it as a whole. First, Jade came in for what Mr. Holt described as work experience. She sat in the office for a few days, observed, asked questions that were endearingly uninformed. Fine. Understandable. Then she started coming in regularly, twice a week, then 3 times. She was given a desk. She was introduced to clients as someone who was joining the team. And then Mr. Holt called me into his office and said the sentence I had been watching build for 3 months.
Samantha, I've been thinking about the structure of the team, and I think we need to make some changes. I'd like to bring Jade on in a more formal capacity. We're going to move her into your role.
I sat with that for a moment. My role, I said.
Your current role, yes. We'd be restructuring your position, stepping you down to a support function, which would of course reflect in your compensation. It's an operational decision, really. The business is evolving, and we need to think about the future.
The business is evolving. We need to think about the future. I have thought about that sentence a great many times since. The way it was designed to sound strategic rather than personal. As though what was happening was an organizational decision made in response to market conditions rather than a father deciding to hand his daughter a job that belonged to someone who had spent 5.5 years earning it. Jade doesn't have accounting qualifications, I said.
No, not yet. That's something she'll work toward. In the meantime, she'll need some training to get up to speed. We estimate several months.
Several months, I repeated.
You'd be responsible for the initial handover and training, yes. I think you're the best person to bring her up to speed quickly.
I looked at him across the desk. I was 33 years old. I had spent 5.5 years making that branch function. I had clients who asked for me by name. I had built systems from scratch. I had vendor relationships I had cultivated personally. I had institutional knowledge in my head that did not exist anywhere else. And I was being asked to train my own replacement, a 22-year-old with no qualifications and no experience, and then watch her take the job I had done for 6 years while I was moved to a support role at reduced pay. And he called it operational. No, I said. If she needs several months of training before she is competent in the role, she is not fit for the role. The silence that followed was not comfortable.
That's your position.
That's my position, I said. I stood up. I thanked him for his time. I walked back to my desk, and I started, that afternoon, updating my CV. There is a particular kind of professional purgatory that opens up after you have refused to comply with something your employer has asked you to do, and before the situation reaches its inevitable conclusion. You are still there. You are still doing the work. But something has changed in the air. A coolness, a new distance, a sense that the ground beneath you is no longer quite solid. Decisions stop being explained to you. Meetings you would previously have attended happen without you. The small courtesies of a functioning professional relationship, the morning check ins, the casual updates, the sense of being part of a shared enterprise, those things quietly disappear, Mr. Holt had not technically done anything wrong. He had not fired me. He had not formally demoted me. But he made the environment uncomfortable in ways that were small, consistent, and cumulative. A cool tone in interactions, clients being redirected toward Jade for things that had always come to me. Comments never quite explicit, always deniable about the importance of adaptability in a changing business environment. It is a strategy. I recognized it even while experiencing it, which did not make it less unpleasant. It is designed to make leaving feel like your choice, so the company does not have to face the consequences of the choice it has already made. I was job hunting, had been since that meeting. But good accounting positions in my area required time to find, and I was not going to rush into something wrong out of desperation. I was going to be methodical the same way I was methodical about everything. In the meantime, I kept doing my job, fully and professionally, because my work ethic is mine, and it does not belong to whoever is behaving badly around me. The clients who needed me got my best. The systems I was responsible for kept running. I did not let anything slip, not because I owed Mr. Holt my excellence anymore, but because I owed it to the clients. And because I am simply not the kind of person who does a job badly, even a job I know I am leaving. Jade sat at her desk and observed. She was pleasant enough in our limited interactions. She asked me questions sometimes, carefully, as if not quite sure of her right to. I answered them honestly, because she was not the author of this situation, and I saw no reason to take it out on her. But I did not volunteer more than was asked. I did not document undocumented processes for her benefit. I did not compile the institutional knowledge in my head into a tidy handover package for someone who was being installed in my chair. That was not passive aggression. That was the simple recognition that my knowledge was mine, and I would take it with me when I left. Now I need to tell you about the social media situation, because this is the part everything else depends on, and it requires some explanation. In my third year at the firm, Holt became concerned about digital presence. A competing firm had started posting regularly on LinkedIn and Facebook job openings, compliance reminders, tax season tips, and Holt felt, not entirely unreasonably, that the firm should be doing the same. He tasked me with setting it all up. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, a modest but professional presence that would make the firm visible to potential clients researching their options online. I was to create the accounts, build out the profiles, start posting, and manage the ongoing content. Fine. Not strictly within my job description, but I was used to doing things not strictly within my job description. I said yes and got on with it. Now here is where it gets interesting. Holt had a requirement. He did not want the social media accounts linked to any official company email address. He was, and I am quoting directly, paranoid about data security and did not want the firm's main email associated with external platforms in case of breaches. This was not entirely irrational, though his understanding of how the risk actually worked was not quite accurate. But it was his firm and his call. What this meant practically was that I needed a separate email address to set up and manage the accounts, not the firm's email, not my personal email, because I was not comfortable using my personal address for company business. So I did what any sensible person would do. I created a dedicated email account, just a free Outlook address, nothing complicated, and used that to register all the platforms. The email was managed by me. The login credentials for Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and a couple of local business directories were all set up through that email address, under my management. The passwords were stored in a notepad document on my desktop, because this was not a sophisticated IT environment with a password manager. It was a small branch office where I was the closest thing to IT support anyone had. I had told Holt, when I first set it all up, that the accounts were registered through a dedicated email and managed by me. He nodded. He did not ask questions. He did not ask who would hold access if I were to leave. He did not ask me to document the credentials anywhere formal. He nodded and went back to whatever he was doing, and I went back to managing his firm's entire online presence. For 2.5 years, the social media grew. Not enormously, this was a small regional accounting firm. Not a lifestyle brand, but consistently. The LinkedIn page had several hundred followers. The Facebook page had gathered a local following of small business owners who found the tax advice posts genuinely useful. We had picked up 3 new clients who specifically mentioned finding us online. It was, quietly, a functioning asset. And the login credentials for all of it lived in a notepad file on my desktop, the desktop of my company computer, the one Holt told me to wipe clean. My new job offer came in on a Thursday. I had been interviewing carefully, selectively, without rushing. I wanted the right role, not just the nearest exit. The firm I was interviewing with was larger, better structured, with a management style I had assessed across 3 rounds of conversations and found to be genuinely different from what I was leaving. More collaborative, more transparent, more interested in the long-term development of its people, rather than the short-term extraction of their efforts. They offered me the position on Thursday morning. The compensation was better. The team was real. The manager who had interviewed me had asked me questions that were actually about me, what I was looking for, what environments I worked best in, what I was hoping to build over the next several years. Nobody at the old firm had asked me any of those questions in 5.5 years. I accepted on Friday morning. I gave my notice that afternoon. I walked into Holt's office, closed the door, and handed him a letter. He read it. He looked up at me. Something moved through his expression surprise, possibly, though I could not tell whether he was surprised I was leaving or surprised I was so calm about it.
Well, I see.
I appreciate the opportunities I've had here, I said. It was technically true. I did not embellish. We had an exchange about the notice period and the logistics of the handover. And then, near the end of the conversation, he said something I noted but did not yet know quite what to do with.
On your last day, I'll need you to fully wipe your computer before you leave. Standard procedure.
Of course, I said. I went back to my desk. I sat for a moment in the quiet of a decision that has been made and cannot be unmade. And then I thought about the notepad file. I thought about it seriously and honestly. I considered the options. I could transfer the credentials to a document before I wiped the machine and leave it for Holt. I could email them to the firm's main address. I could set up a proper handover note explaining the email account, the platforms, the login procedures. I could document it all neatly and completely and leave with a clear conscience and an unambiguous record of professional conduct. I could do all of those things. But then I thought about 5.5 years, about the clients I had built from scratch relationships into loyal accounts, about the processes I had designed and implemented without ever being properly compensated for the additional responsibility they represented, about the months of professional discomfort, about being told I would train my own replacement. And I thought about the fact that Mr. Holt had been present 2.5 years ago when I explained exactly how the social media accounts were set up and why. He had nodded. He had asked no questions. He had done none of the things you do when you want to actually understand something, as opposed to the things you do when you want to appear to be listening while already thinking about something else. That inattention was his, not mine. I made my decision. I would do exactly what he asked, completely and correctly. If he wanted the computer wiped, I would wipe the computer. And if he had questions about anything else, well, he should have asked them when he had the chance. My last day was a Friday. I dressed as I always dressed professionally, neatly, with the same care I had brought to every day of the previous 5.5 years. Some people dress down for their last day, as if the ending gives them permission to stop caring. That is not who I am. I arrived at my usual time. I cleared my desk carefully. I handed over the physical files and documentation. I had prepared everything formally my responsibility to pass on, organized and labeled and complete, because my professionalism is not contingent on how I have been treated. I was not going to let the ending tarnish the quality of what I had done while I was there. I said goodbye to my colleagues. One of them, a woman named Petra, who had been at the firm almost as long as I, had hugged me in the small kitchen when nobody was watching and said,
"You are the best person who has ever worked here, and he does not deserve you, and I hope your new place knows exactly what they've got."
I told her I hope so too. I meant it. In the mid-afternoon, Mr. Holt appeared at my desk. He had Jade with him. This was the final gesture. She was to be introduced, in my last hour, as my successor positioned as the new supervisor overseeing the final handover. The fact that she had been there for 3 months and had never supervised anything in her life, and that I had been there for 5.5 years and had functionally run the branch, was apparently not an irony that required acknowledging. I was professional. I was polite. I showed Jade where the remaining physical files were stored, walked her through the cabinet system, explained the filing logic. She asked a few questions. I answered them. And then Mr. Holt stood over my desk and said,
Right, Samantha. Before you go, I need you to fully wipe this machine. Clean it completely. Everything off.
I looked at him. This is the moment I want you to hold on to. Because what I did next was not impulsive. It was not mean-spirited. It was a genuine, sincere last attempt to do the right thing by a man who had not done the right thing by me. Are you sure? I said. There might be some things on here you'd want to.
Just get on with it and wipe it clean. We don't need you to check anything.
He talked over me. Not angrily, not cruelly, just automatically. The way you talk over someone when you have, on some fundamental level, stopped treating what they say as worth receiving. Jade looked at the floor. I looked at Mr. Holt for one moment longer. He was already turning away, already somewhere else in his mind, already treating this as a formality rather than a decision with consequences. I picked up my bag. I sat back down at my desk. And I wiped the computer. Every file, every folder, every cached document and downloaded template and saved spreadsheet, and yes, the small, unprepossessing notepad document sitting on the desktop that contained, in plain text, the email address and every single password for every single social media account the firm had been running for 2.5 years. I did not pause before deleting it. I had already decided. The computer wiped clean in about 12 minutes. I stood up. I gathered my remaining personal items. I said goodbye to the room, to Petra, to nobody in particular. I walked out into a Friday afternoon. It was the beginning of something. 1 week later, I was at my new job. I had been there for 4 days. I was learning the systems, meeting the team, discovering that the difference between a well-run firm and a poorly run one is apparent within about 90 minutes of walking through the door. The new place was well-run, properly. It had documentation and processes and a culture of shared knowledge rather than the siloed one-person dependency situation I had just spent 5.5 years inside. It was, in every professional sense, a relief. My personal phone rang. I looked at the number, and then I recognized it. Mr. Holt. I answered. Hello.
Samantha, yes. I'm calling about the social media accounts.
I waited.
Jade has been trying to access the Facebook account to put up some posts. We're coming up to tax season, and we want to run some promotional content, but she can't get in. She doesn't have the login details. Do you have them somewhere? Did you leave them in the handover documentation?
I paused. Just for a moment. Long enough to be sure I was going to say the next thing exactly right. I don't have the login credentials, I said. I no longer have access to the email account the platforms were registered through, and I'm afraid I can't help you retrieve them.
Well, you must have written them down somewhere. We need those accounts.
I did write them down, I said. They were in a notepad document on the desktop of my company computer. Silence. Not a short silence. The kind with texture.
The computer you wiped.
The computer you told me to wipe, I said. Yes. Another silence.
Samantha, is there any way to...
The email account the platforms were registered through was created specifically for this purpose, I said. The credentials are not stored anywhere I have access to. Each platform will need to go through its own account recovery process. LinkedIn tends to have the most responsive business support. I'd start there. Facebook's process is more complicated. I'd allow quite a bit of time for that one. A very long pause.
Why didn't you tell me this was going to be an issue?
And there it was. That was the line I had been waiting for. Not with cruelty, not with triumph, just with the particular precision of someone who had prepared. very quietly, for exactly this question. I did try to tell you, I said. When you asked me to wipe the computer, I said, are you sure? There might be some things on here you'd want to. You told me to just get on with it. So I did. The silence that followed was the longest yet. I let it go on as long as it needed to. Eventually, he said something I did not quite catch, and then the call ended. I set down my phone. I sat for a moment at my new desk, in my new office, in a firm that treated people like adults with expertise worth respecting. Then I got back to work. I want to talk about what Jade actually walked into after I left, because I think it matters not as a triumph, but as the full picture of what bad decisions cost. She had been installed in a job she was not qualified for, at a firm she had not earned entry to, by a father who loved her enough to give her an opportunity, but not enough to give her the honest conversation about whether she was prepared for it. That is not Jade's fault, but it is not a small thing to carry. The social media accounts were locked for weeks. Facebook's account recovery process was, as I had predicted, particularly slow and requiring documentation that the firm struggled to provide because the original setup had been done through an email that no longer existed under anyone's active management. LinkedIn was faster, but still required time. In the meantime, tax season arrived. Which, if you are running an accounting firm trying to attract new clients during the period when the maximum number of people are actively looking for one, is not the ideal time to have your entire digital presence be inaccessible. I heard some of this through Petra, who had the gift of reporting information about a former employer's difficulties with precisely the tone of neutral observation that allows the listener to draw their own conclusions. Ugh.
They've had to start from scratch. New accounts, no followers, no review history. Everything you'd built, gone. Jade's doing her best, but there's nobody to show her, and she's a bit lost.
And then, a little later,
He had to bring in a marketing consultant, a proper agency on monthly retainer. He was apparently furious about the cost.
and then, most perfectly.
He told someone the whole thing was a systems failure, not a management failure, a systems failure.
I sat with that one for a good while. A systems failure. As if the system had spontaneously collapsed. As if nobody had made a series of deliberate, personal choices that created a single point of vulnerability sitting, entirely unprotected, in a notepad file on a company desktop. As if nobody had waved away the person trying to mention this and told her to just get on with it. Systems failures are convenient. They do not have faces. They do not remind you of anything you said or chose not to listen to. People are less convenient, but they are, as Mr. Holt was learning, significantly harder to replace. I want to pause here and talk about nepotism, because I think it deserves more than a passing mention. Nepotism is one of those things almost everyone agrees is wrong in the abstract, and almost everyone accommodates in practice. It is easy to say that positions should go to the most qualified person. It is harder to hold that principle when the decision maker is someone's father, and the professional and the personal are not cleanly separable the way we like to pretend they are. But here is what I want to say about it, the thing that goes beyond the obvious unfairness. Nepotism does not only harm the person who is passed over, it harms the person who is installed in their place. It puts them in a position they have not earned and may not be ready for, on very shaky ground, in a dynamic where their success or failure is not really about their ability. It is about whether their sponsor can maintain the illusion that the decision was sound. Jade was 22 years old. She had no qualifications. She was put into a role that required 5.5 years of institutional knowledge to do well, and then that institutional knowledge walked out the door with its holder. She was, in a real sense, set up to struggle in a way that had nothing to do with her capability and everything to do with her father's choices. I did not enjoy thinking about this. It is one of the genuinely uncomfortable things about a story that is otherwise quite satisfying. I hope Jade found her footing. I hope someone gave her honest guidance about the qualifications she would actually need. I hope her father eventually had the honesty to acknowledge that what he called an operational restructuring was something much simpler and much less defensible. I genuinely hope those things. I am not being sarcastic. But I am also human, and I will not pretend there was no satisfaction in the sequence of events that followed the words, just get on with it and wipe it clean. There was. There absolutely was. My new firm was everything the old one had not been. I want to be careful about how I say that because the difference was not dramatic or immediately obvious. It was something quieter, the slow accumulation of small things that told me I was in a functional professional environment. The way my manager communicated decisions and the reasoning behind them. The way knowledge was shared rather than hoarded. The way the team operated as people, all working toward the same outcome, rather than people managing their individual positions within a fixed hierarchy controlled by one man's preferences. On my first day, my manager walked me through the firm's documentation systems. Everything was logged, everything was shared. Login credentials were in a proper password manager, with authorized access distributed across relevant staff. Processes were written down. Handover protocols existed and were tested regularly. If I were to leave tomorrow, the institutional knowledge I was building would stay in the systems available to whoever came next. I sat in that onboarding session and felt something I had not felt in years. Not excitement, something quieter than that. Recognition. This was how organizations were supposed to work. This was what it looked like when a firm understood that knowledge belongs to the institution, but that in order for that to be true, you have to actively invest in capturing and distributing it. You cannot expect people to share what they know simply out of goodwill. In a culture where knowledge is power and sharing it makes you vulnerable, that is not a culture of sharing. That is a culture of exposure. Mr. Holt had built exactly that kind of culture. Not intentionally, I think just through neglect, through never thinking carefully about what would happen if the person who knew everything decided to leave. He found out. My new manager said something to me in that first week that I have kept close ever since. We were talking about the firm's approach to knowledge management, and she said,
The minute any of this depends entirely on one person, we've failed as leaders. Our job is to make sure the organization is never held hostage to any individual's choice to stay.
I thought about a notepad file sitting on a desktop. That's exactly right, I said. She moved on to the next agenda item. I have not forgotten it. I want to talk about loyalty, because loyalty is at the center of this story, even though it never gets named. I was loyal to that firm for 5.5 years. Not naively. Not because I had nowhere else to go. I was loyal because I believed the work mattered, and because I had built something there I was genuinely proud of, and because, if I am completely honest, I had conflated my investment in the work with a sense of belonging that the firm had never actually offered me. That is a trap. I was in it. I did not know I was in it until the moment Mr. Holt told me my position was being restructured so that his daughter could have it. That moment was clarifying. Not immediately painful, the pain came later, in the months of professional discomfort that followed, but clarifying, in the way certainty always is, even when what it is certain about is disappointing. Loyalty that is not reciprocated is not loyalty. It is a donation, and donations do not come with any expectation of return. If you have been giving your best work and full effort and genuine investment to a place that views you as replaceable the moment something more convenient comes along, that is not a professional relationship. That is an arrangement working entirely in one direction, and the direction is not yours. I am not saying be disloyal. Loyalty is a good and important quality. What I am saying is, know the difference between loyalty and self-erasure. Loyalty is offering your best work in the context of a relationship that respects you. Self-erasure is offering your best work in the context of a relationship that has decided you are invisible, and then offering more, in the hope that eventually they will see you. They will not. Not until you are gone. Document what is yours to document. Keep records of what you have built and what it has contributed. Do not let the institutional knowledge you carry exist only in your head. Undocumented, dependent on your continued presence and goodwill. Write things down, but write them in a way that you retain copies. Your expertise is yours. Carry it with you. And when someone tells you to just get on with it after waving away your attempt to flag something important, understand that that is information. About what they value, about how they listen, about who they are in moments when paying attention costs them something. That information is worth having. Use it accordingly. I have a professional fondness for the particular irony of what happened next, and I want to share it because it is genuinely too perfect to leave out. Tax season, for an accounting firm, is the equivalent of Christmas for retail. It is the period when the maximum number of potential clients are actively looking for the service you provide. They are searching online. They are reading reviews. They are checking social media for signs of expertise and the kind of human presence that makes a financial professional feel approachable. For an accounting firm to be, during this period, essentially invisible online because its Facebook page was locked, its Instagram inaccessible, its LinkedIn following wiped when new accounts had to be created from scratch is not a minor inconvenience. It is a problem with a price tag attached. I do not know the exact figure. I cannot calculate how many potential clients searched for accounting firms in that region during that tax season and found either nothing or a brand new account with no followers, no reviews, no content history, no sign that the business had ever existed online before 3 weeks ago. But I know that the 3 clients the firm had previously gained specifically through online channels had come because of the social media presence I had built. I know that the reviews, the consistent posting, the accumulated credibility of 2.5 years of digital presence that takes time to build, you do not rebuild it in a month. And I know that a digital marketing consultant charging a monthly retainer to rebuild what a dedicated employee had maintained as part of her regular workload for no additional compensation costs significantly more than a conversation about whether that employee's role should be properly valued. Mr. Holt chose the more expensive option in the end. He just chose it too late, for the wrong reasons. And after talking over the person who had been trying to tell him something important, the irony almost writes itself. I keep coming back to the moment in this story that I think says the most about everything. Not the restructuring conversation, not giving my notice, not the decision I made about the notepad file. The moment I keep returning to is the smaller one, the unremarkable one. The moment where I said, "Are you sure? There might be some things on here you'd want to." And he talked over me. Not angrily, not cruelly, automatically, reflexively. The way you talk over someone when you have stopped. On some fundamental level, treating what they say as information worth receiving. When they have become, in your mind, a problem being managed rather than a person worth listening to. I tried to tell him. I genuinely, sincerely tried. And he waved me off. That is the center of this story, I think. Not the wipe, not the locked accounts, not the panicked phone call. The center is that brief, casual, entirely unremarkable moment when he had the chance to listen at no cost, with no difficulty, just by pausing for 10 more seconds and letting me finish a sentence, and he chose not to. Because that moment was not actually about the computer. It was about a pattern. A 5.5-year pattern of exactly that. Useful information offered and not received. Expertise present and not respected. A person showing up fully and being seen as a function rather than a mind. The wiped computer was just the moment when that pattern had a visible consequence. The moment when the cost of not listening became legible. Impossible to dismiss as a system's failure, even to himself, in his most private moments of honesty. He learned something that day. I cannot control what he did with it. But I know that whoever comes after me at that firm will be operating in an environment that now has, at minimum, a proper password manager. Because the alternative was demonstrated very clearly. That is, in its own modest way, a contribution. You are welcome, Mr. Holt. I have been at my new firm for 2.5 years. I was promoted once, about 14 months in. It happened in a meeting that lasted approximately 20 minutes and involved an actual conversation about the value I had added, my professional goals, my compensation expectations, and the firm's plans for my development. It was the most straightforward professional conversation I had had in years, and I almost did not know what to do with it. I am good at my job. I have always been good at my job. The difference now is that the people around me know it, and they say so. And they back it up with the practical reality of compensation that reflects my responsibilities in management, that treats my expertise as an investment rather than a commodity. My knowledge is documented. Everything I manage has a backup procedure. The clients I oversee are part of a shared system, not a personal one. If I were to leave tomorrow, the handover would be clean, and the firm would absorb it without crisis. That is how it should be. That is what a functional organization looks like. Petra left the old firm about a year after I did. She is doing well somewhere else. We still talk sometimes in the way of people who survived the same professional era and came out the other side with a shared understanding of what they are not going back to. Jade, I genuinely do not know. I lost that thread and have not tried to find it again. I hope she found something that suited her better, something she had chosen rather than been handed. Something that gave her the chance to be seen for who she actually was, rather than who her father wanted her to be. She had a cheerful quality that I think, in the right context, could be quite good. That is not nothing. Mr. Holt, I know nothing of, and I am at peace with that. If you are watching this, I want to say something directly. There is a kind of worker who does more than is asked, more than is required, more than is seen, who fills gaps without being told they exist, who carries institutional knowledge that nobody has ever bothered to write down, because writing it down would require acknowledging how much there is and how much depends on the person carrying it. If that is you, I see you. And I want to tell you something that took me 5.5 years to learn, which I will try to save you those years on. Your expertise is yours, not the firm's, not your managers, not the organization's. The expertise in your head, the processes you have figured out, the relationships you have built, the workarounds you have discovered, the knowledge that makes everything run that is yours, and you carry it when you leave. It was yours before you arrived, it is yours when you go. But here is the thing alongside that. The physical record of your expertise, the passwords, the credentials, the document where you wrote the thing nobody else bothered to learn, those have to live somewhere. Either they live in the organization's systems, properly documented with proper access management, or they leave with you. If the organization has not invested in capturing what you know, if it has depended on your presence and your goodwill without building real infrastructure around what you carry that is not your failure, that is theirs. You have a choice when you leave. You can make the departure as smooth as possible, document everything, build the handover, make sure nothing collapses behind you. That is the generous option. It is always available to you, regardless of how you have been treated. Or you can do exactly what is asked of you completely, correctly, to the letter, and let the consequences of their choices land where they belong. Both are legitimate, both have their place, and sometimes a man tells you to just get on with it and wipe it clean. He says it in a tone that makes perfectly clear that he has stopped treating what you say as worth hearing. And you try one more time, because that is who you are. Because you were raised to do the right thing, and doing the right thing means giving someone the chance to make a different decision even when you suspect they will not take it. And then he talks over you, and you shrug, and you do exactly what he asked, because you tried to warn him. You genuinely did. And some lessons are not yours to prevent. Know your worth. Document what is yours to document. And when someone talks over you in the middle of a sentence they needed to hear, remember that moment. File it away. Because that moment is not about a computer. It is not about a notepad file. It is not about a social media account. That moment is them showing you exactly who they are. And who they are is not someone who deserves your protection. If this story landed for you, if you have ever watched someone be handed your chair, if you have ever tried to warn someone who had already stopped listening, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments. Tell me what you carried. Tell me what you did with it when you left. And if you are in it right now, if your expertise is being taken for granted and your warnings are being talked over and you are being asked to train the person being installed in your place, please hear this. You are not obligated to protect people from the consequences of not listening to you. You only have to do what is asked, nothing more. Hit the like button if this story meant something to you. Subscribe to Office Confession for stories of women in workplaces and in the world who were underestimated, overlooked, and undervalued, and who eventually, methodically, and entirely within their rights, let the truth of that become visible. I will see you next time. Stay documented, back up what is yours, and always, always let them finish giving you the instruction before you decide whether to save them from it. After all, that is more courtesy than they gave you.